Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, thanks for swinging by to listen to Check Your Thread. How are you doing? I'm good, thanks. It's been a great week for the podcast also. During the last 7 days, I've spoken to 2 people who have been on my list of dream guests since before the podcast even launched. I've now got a bank of great recordings that I'm going to be releasing over the summer, and I'm so excited for you to hear them. Have you heard last week's episode yet? It's number 47 and called Introduction to Patching. Previous podcast guest Shams Eldin Rogers called it, and I quote, just a little cute, uncontroversial jewel of an episode. So if you haven't heard it yet and you want to know what a cute little uncontroversial jewel of a podcast episode sounds like, then check it out. Plus, if you haven't already, please make sure that you favourite, like or subscribe to Check Your Thread in whichever podcast app you use so you don't miss future episodes. So I hope that any making you've been doing since last episode has been going well. I've been having to deploy my own making abilities to kind of fight fires somewhat this week. My son needed an emergency sun hat for a school trip, and then suddenly my daughter just doesn't have any undies or summer pyjamas that fit. So those items have had to take precedence over finishing my Fotinia top. I've also been mending and laundering stacks of school uniform items that have been donated for the second-hand uniform sale that I'm organising. So as I think I mentioned previously, my kids' school doesn't really have a system for collecting or redistributing unwanted or outgrown uniform. It's been bugging me for ages, so I decided to step up and arrange a collection and a stall to then sell unwanted items at the forthcoming school summer fair, and all the money raised at that fair is then going to the school. The amount of uniform items that has been donated has been amazing considering it's a really small school, but the ranging condition of the items has been pretty broad. There's a bunch of brand new items literally still with the tags on, and there's also plenty of items that need a lot of attention. So I've been repairing worn out cuffs on school sweatshirts and then bleaching polo shirts to see if I can get them vaguely close to white again, ready to be sold. Plus, there was a lot that just needed a good wash. And actually, there's only been 2 or 3 items that were beyond help that have to be sent to the textile recycling bank. The summer fair is in a couple of weeks, so fingers crossed that most of it gets sold and reused. This week, Check Your Thread has one awesome new supporter via Patreon. Many thanks, Anna. Patrons of the podcast make it possible for me to spend the time required to produce weekly episodes. If you enjoy the podcast and you're in a position to make small monthly contributions, please find out more info about the Patreon via the link in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. So on to today's episode. I'm so excited to share this one with you. So I discovered A Smaller Life podcast a few months ago, and I rapidly listened to all of the episodes that are in English, and now I can't wait to listen when a new episode drops. It covers how to knit more sustainably, as well as topics relating to small businesses, and the creator and host Saskia is a delight, as well as being super knowledgeable and interesting. So shortly after finding the podcast, I contacted Saskia to see if she would be up for a podcast swap. She's already released an episode with me as the guest, and now I get to introduce her to listeners to Check Your Thread. There are obviously heaps of crossovers and parallels between our podcasts and our worlds more generally, but there's also some really interesting differences too. We dig into those in this conversation, and Saskia kindly talks me, a complete knitting newbie, through how to approach yarn-based crafts from a more sustainable angle. So beyond the interesting and informative stuff she imparts in this conversation, Saskia also has such a lovely voice and is so sweet, so I know you're going to enjoy listening to this. Hello Saskia, thank you so much for agreeing to my podcast swap proposition and for sharing some of your time with me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Zoe.
So we've already spoken for your podcast, A Smaller Life, which I'm a big fan of. So I have already had the pleasure of meeting you. However, for the Check Your Thread listeners who have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, could you please tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Holy moly. Well, so my name is Saskia de Feijter. I am in Rotterdam in the Netherlands in my workroom, which doubles as a podcasting room, sewing room, mending room. It's my room. And I've started working here 2 years ago, no, a year and a half ago, when I moved to this beautiful house that I love. I used to have a yarn shop in the city. So I moved out of the city to a house that had a separate place that's on the house that I could use to teach people how to knit. That was the idea.
Oh, like a workshop.
Yeah, yeah, with a a separate door, so it wouldn't be too invasive in my personal life. So now I've moved into the city, and then here comes COVID, and I had to make a really difficult decision. And when COVID came, I closed the yarn shop. But it was not just a yarn shop; it was also a needlecraft school in ways. I had a bunch of teachers come in and teach crochet, knitting, spinning, weaving, embroidery, yarn dyeing, all those kind of fun stuff. And it was such a wonderful decade, actually. It was a long time. And I dabbled with some yarn dyeing myself. I started my own brand of tools and bags and products you might need for crafting. So I did all those kinds of things. And then I was in my lovely new home, and I thought I have to kind of figure out what I'm going to do next. So building a community around the yarn shop just kind of happened. People come into the shop and they hang out, and I made it into a knitting cafe. So we used to have fresh scones on Saturday, and we had really good coffee. I was the smallest buyer of the Rotterdam hipster coffee that they had. And I had to show them if I really understood how to make coffee. And
Oh, really? There was that barrier to entry. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, I'm a book barista. I haven't learned from a book, but they said it was okay.
They deemed you acceptable to buy their coffee. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So you had a kind of community in your shop.
Yes,
so we're going to talk more about your online community in a bit. So it kind of developed from the one that you had in the shop.
Yeah.
Really lovely. Did. So how are your days managed at the moment?
Well, I am by nature a very unstructured woman. I have a brain that goes in every which direction at all times, unless I get into a flow.
Right.
And then I kind of wake up after a couple of hours and I've done a massive amount of work. Now I have a super structured life. So I have my month is planned. So I know the first Monday of the month, I do general strategy and growth.
Nice.
And then so on and so forth. So I have specific days a month and specific days a week for different things that I do, which are podcasting. I spent quite some time on writing mails to people that subscribe to my mailing list. I work with a group of creative businesses that I guide / coach into a conscious way of doing business. That's the shortest way of explaining it. And then I have the online community of makers and knitters mostly that are working to get their conscious wardrobe.
Awesome. So as we've previously discussed, it turns out that we are kind of sisters from another mister.
Yes.
In that we've developed almost parallel podcasts in a way, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
They both focus on how to create garments in a more sustainable way. So I'm really looking forward to discovering some more of the parallels and also the differences between knitting more sustainably and sewing more sustainably. That's awesome. So you told me already about your journey from creating workshops and then having an in-person bricks and mortar yarn store, and then taking that, having to kind of close your doors on that, and then from that developing kind of two communities in a sense, and a podcast. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
Okay, so I have to talk about myself for a minute to preface my question. So I am a beginner level knitter. I dabbled a bit when I was in university and I made some terrible mittens and stuff. And then more recently, over the last couple of years or so, I've got back into it because I've realised that sewing alone can't really provide me with sufficiently warm garments for the colder months. And I'm the kind of person that really feels cold a lot of the time. So far, I've knitted a headband earwarmer, which I wear all the time. And I've made 2 garments, one of which I ended up unraveling, and I'm kind of re-knitting it slightly differently. So I've been selecting yarn that has no synthetic content so that one day it will biodegrade. But aside from that, I'm clueless about how to approach knitting whilst keeping sustainability in mind, like I tried to do with sewing. So can you please help? I wrote down capitals, by the way. Please, can you give us some insight on some of the more unsustainable aspects of knitting and crochet from an environmental, labour rights or animal welfare viewpoints, and then how we can make some better choices? I know that's like a massive question, isn't it?
I know, but I'll just start talking and we'll get there.
Yeah, just like a starting point for us to kind of dive in.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of parallels because we're talking about fiber, and fiber comes from the same sources. So wool fabric comes from sheep, cotton fabric comes from the cotton plant, and same goes for yarn. So everything you've learned while you were sewing goes for knitting.
Well, that's helpful. That's a start.
Yeah, it's a big start. I think essentially, if we talk about sustainability and animal and people, human welfare, it's all the same.
Right.
So there might be different steps. So where the raw material goes to the weaving factory, with knitting it's getting spun. So it splits there. And obviously sometimes fabrics and yarns get dyed after spinning or after weaving, and some get dyed before, depending on the process. But that's the basic part where it splits. And then I don't know what that's like with fabric, but the complicated part is that with knitting, what happens a lot is they take the merino yarn from Australia, then they ship it to Italy where it gets spun or sorted, and then it gets spun somewhere else, and then it gets dyed somewhere else, and then it goes to a brand that buys it, and then
they package it and then ship it somewhere else.
And then I don't know, it goes on and on and on. So for me, what really, really helps to make it super sustainable in one big sweep is local.
Right.
Find as local as you can, but that means that you have to sacrifice a lot with yarn.
Choice being the biggest one.
Choice being the biggest one, the way it feels, depending on where you live. If you want local yarns in the Netherlands, you don't ever have to scrub your skin anymore. Because the sheep here are the wool is
gnarly.
Yeah. And obviously we have some alpaca here and we can do a blend and all of that. But the Netherlands is a small, small country. So we don't have a lot of options. So when you go to find local yarns, you have to kind of put local into quotation marks. What is local? I have a friend, Anna Maltz. She wrote this amazing knitting book. And what she did in that book, she made patterns that used 2 strands of yarn and then knit them together and knit them separately. So if you have a black and a white, you would have black parts, white parts, and gray parts.
Oh.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
It's called marling.
Yeah.
And the book's called Marl Isle, from Fair Isle and Marling. Oh, I'm already getting way too deep into this. But what she taught me was she got yarn in Scotland. She lives in London. For one pattern, she got yarn in Scotland. And then she took a ruler and she doubled it to the south. And she ended up in the south of France. So distances are so weird.
Yeah.
Like if I would take the same distance from London to Scotland, I can get yarn from all over Europe, you know?
Yeah. So maybe expanding the definition of local to include the continent.
To quickly mention, like, my biggest rule of thumb that I use is it has to be doable for me as a person. I want to live a sustainable life. I want to make the right decisions. I'm ready to make sacrifices for that because we have to. But not everything is doable. So you have to be a little bit flexible.
If you also just want to make something.
Absolutely. And not walk around like a bear.
A scratchy bear.
She scratched a bit.
So I have a feeling that because in the sewing community, we do talk a lot about fibre, we talk a lot about biodegradability or compostability. That's starting to be something that people are talking quite a lot about. But we don't tend to talk about animal welfare, although we do often use wool fabrics. So that's literally something that isn't really a conversation that I've heard being had. So what
definitely is.
Yeah. How do we know that the yarn that we are buying, or is there a way that we can even guess that the yarn we're buying has treated animals well or not?
Yes, we can. Just taking a step in that direction of going local is knowing where it comes from, knowing who is the brand, how do they work, do they actually know the farmers, do they buy the wool from different kinds of places and put it all together. And that's where it becomes a little bit complicated, because price is a big issue when it comes to that. Cheaper yarns tend to come from dealers that deal in bulk.
Sure.
And they take it from everywhere and you don't know what you're buying. So I really would like to stress that wool is not unfriendly to animals.
Right.
You can definitely use wool if you are not super vegan, or vegan at all.
If you have concern for animal welfare, but you're not a vegan, you still can feel comfortable using wool-based yarns.
Just get educated. And we're starting here. The thing is, a farmer is a person and they are all different. And you just want to know where your stuff comes from. So let me give you an example. I know this yarn brand that is amazing. They do everything themselves. They're in the UK. They have their own flock of sheep. It's all women, so it's amazing.
What are they called?
Little Grey Sheep.
Oh, cute. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yes. They're run by Emma, the farmer. Then there is the shepherd, who's a woman as well, which I love. And then Emma's daughter does the marketing. Emma does the dyeing of the yarn as well. And quite recently, I think in the last year or last 2 years, they also have their own spinning mill at the farm. So everything gets done in one spot.
Right.
So my wish would be for people to find that kind of brand that ticks all the values for them, their boxes, and kind of stick with it.
Right.
Because I think I'm going to go back to something else, but the most important thing is that we need to learn to make choices and be happy with what's there. So if you go into a shop and they don't have the right shade of olive green, then take another color. So don't go and get it online because you want that specific kind of color.
Be a bit more adaptable.
Yeah, or find another way to make that a sustainable choice.
Yeah. Okay, so my first kind of cardigan that I made, I bought a kit from We Are Knitters. Was that good or bad?
I haven't really looked at them for a while, so I cannot give you a complete answer, but I think it would be somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I think they buy in bulk, but they do also, I think most of the yarns are all natural, which is good.
Yeah, I definitely check that.
Yeah. And I think they offer organic cotton, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I think they're on that.
Yeah.
Kind of,
having just mentioned organic cotton there, is there like an organic certification or something for like sheep-based yarns? Is there something we can, beyond buying local, is there some sort of certification or something we can look for to see if what we're buying is better?
There is not a label that is so well known that I know it. So that's a really good question, because I feel like my cheeks are getting red. Like, why don't I know of a label? And that says a lot, because
Probably isn't one because you're plugged in.
I think so. I don't think there is one. So what I do is I just basically research where it's coming from. First of all, I use what I have. That's number one. Read the label. If it says mulesing free, that's a good thing. So mulesing is something they do to sheep to kind of protect them from fly streak, which is flies getting into their behind. And that could be really nasty for them to get it. But the way they fix it is even worse. Like they cut away the skin and they do not help them with the pain. So
Oh.
that's not good. You do not want wool from sheep that were mulesed. So no
Okay, so that is
mulesing.
something that if it's not been done,
Yeah.
will be written on the label.
Yes, usually with good merino, it will be, because it's usually with merino yarn, so the softest type yarn. The merino usually comes from Australia and New Zealand, and they have masses and masses and masses of sheep there. And not every sheep farmer in Australia and New Zealand is bad. That's
Yeah.
also a thing. And people tend to like, oh, I don't want yarn from there because they all do that. That's not true. There's organic farmers there as well. There's people that love their animals that make fantastic yarns. The question should be, when you're in the UK, should you get yarn from Australia? That's another question. But yeah. So that's a little bit on animal welfare. I think you're safest if you know where it comes from, and that usually means smaller brands and a little bit higher prices. So to round that story off.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Right. So here's an assumption I have, that because knitting a garment or crocheting a garment or accessory takes longer than sewing one, my assumption is that knitters are more likely to create with care and be more mindful of the materials that they're consuming. Would you say that most people who knit and crochet are plugged into the points that you previously made? I mean, how much do you think that these topics are being discussed in the broader knitting community as opposed to your kind of smaller, super switched on Yarvol community?
Oh, not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. I definitely am knitting in a bubble.
Right.
There are so many people that knit or crochet. Even in my city, we don't have any shops anymore, which is crazy, but there's so many people. Every other person I talk to tried or is doing it, or it doesn't matter how old they are, but the great masses are focused on price.
Right.
And I don't know if that's because after the war, I can't believe we still say that after the war, but then we started making things. And then when acrylics became the new thing, that was so cheap and all the colors, and you could throw it in a washing machine. That was awesome. So people would start using that. And that generation was not really into wool and natural yarns.
Right.
And then still, the older generation and people that are, I don't want to say things that are really generalizing, like putting people in one big group, but I think there's so many needle crafters that really kind of need to wake up. And yeah.
So can you tell us about the Yarvol community? So who is it for? How does it work? And what do you guys get up to?
Okay. So just a little bit of history from the shop. There was no community because we were all in lockdown and we needed our community. So I already kind of got into that online thing just because I always want to try new things and see what's the new thing in the marketing world and in everything and online. So I was looking into that and tried it. And I invited all the people on my mailing list into the digital community just to get a place to come together and talk about what's going on, what you're making and all of that. And it was so fun. And I had like literally hundreds of people come in.
Oh, amazing.
And that was amazing.
Mainly from the Netherlands?
Mainly from the Netherlands, but I've always communicated in English because I always wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And seeing that lots of Dutch people speak English, that would be it's the most logical language to choose. And so I also have international people in the community, but I did it for free. It was a gift to them. And after a while, the community was going to be my business. It was going to be the place where I shared my knowledge and where I bring people together. And because I'm not a big fan of social media anymore, I was a huge fan. I changed. Different story. We'll do another interview on that one. But I wanted them to have a space where they could really share what was going on and feel safe. But also just have their own opinions, not necessarily all the same opinion. which is really hard to do. People think you're talking about consciousness, so I have to be an angel. No, you don't. You just have to think it through and spend some energy figuring out what you want.
Yeah, because there's just not one right answer when it comes to making more sustainable choices, is there?
No, because I am definitely completely into sustainability, and I kind of see it as a sport in a way. For me, I have to live a sustainable lifestyle to the best of my ability, and that means that I don't do everything well. Living a sustainable lifetime, you have to make choices that make it sustainable for you. And anyway, so that group of people, I just got them in and we hung out online and stuff. And then it kind of transformed into something. I started learning about communities. I read books. I took courses. I had the time. So I really made it literally my business. Then I started building it. We have a topic every month, and we work towards a common goal. So what we did is we talked about structure for 1 month, about color. We did clear out and clean out for 1 month, and did our closets together, and got everything out and went through the whatever we have, and then put piles for mending and piles for the things you do. You always want to do it, but you never get around to it, or you it forward. And the best thing about a community is that you do things together and that you have the accountability.
Yes.
And it's not a Facebook group. It's not sit in the back and watch and don't say anything. The main bulk of my work is to get people to share. It's not easy because people are getting so used to just consuming the information, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah.
And I want to know what everybody thinks, and I love it if you all have different opinions, because then we really can get to work.
Yeah, that's when the conversations happen.
Yes, exactly. So we do a topic every month, and then on a semi-daily basis, I will drop in a question, and people can respond to the question, and the conversation gets going, and we do challenges, doable, small challenges.
Nice. I love it. It's good for people that need accountability. And as you say, it's so easy to put things off. But then when you're like, this is what we're doing this month, you're like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
So we're recording this in May. So I know that your community is getting involved in Me Made May. So what have you learned anything about your handmade wardrobe?
Oh, absolutely. It was my first Me Made May as well. Me Made May as well. And I pledged to wear only my handmade items by me or by somebody else.
Cool.
Obviously, everything is handmade, but I distinguish between a friend that has made an item or a really small business that has. I have a tailored vest.
Right.
It was made by a tailor, so that was okay. And then also brands that I really want to support in the future, brands that fit my values at this moment in time. So basically what I did is I created my ideal wardrobe from what I have, and I'm good. I'm not having a lot of trouble. I miss my jeans because I haven't been able to find a good sustainable jeans at plus size that is preferably from a Dutch brand, but I have contacted the Dutch jeans brand, which was very interesting, but that's also another story.
Okay, cool.
I found out that I wear a lot of color and that they kind of all go together. Don't do a lot of prints, but a lot of color blocking. And I thought maybe my life could be, or my wardrobe could be all blue linens, but then that would be kind of one of those moments where you think, I want a capsule wardrobe, and it would feel so collected and so calm. Like you go into a holiday home and they have only what you need and you feel like so calm.
Yeah. Like, why do I even need to go back to my own home? I have everything I need.
I don't need all those trinkets. I just need one spoon. Which is totally not true, because I would be bored out of my mind with only blue linen. But no, it's been good. I know that I need more fitted clothes because my sewing skills are, if I can be so bold, probably like your knitting skills. I'm a beginner. So I kind of make square things a lot still. And my body's definitely not square. So I've learned that I want to make some more fitted things. Yeah.
Awesome. You've learned loads.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So from what you just said, and from what I understand from your excellent episode number 29 of your podcast, which is My Conscious Wardrobe Plan, you yourself are taking steps towards adding a few more sewn garments into your wardrobe. So what's your motivation for that? Is it the kind of flip side of my motivation for learning to knit?
Yes, I love this question because we are completely the same on that one. My goal is not to be clad in knitting, although I do love a knitted pant in the future. I don't know why, but the idea is I want a sustainable wardrobe. And it doesn't mean that it has to be handmade, because you talk about this in your podcast as well. Handmade is not necessarily the most sustainable, but we just love making things. So it's always going to be a part of it. I want that mix. I want the mix of what can I find that's already there, that fits me, that I feel happy in. It has to make me feel good, because otherwise I don't want to wear it. What do I need that's warm and woolly? And then I have the skill to make that myself. If I want flowy dresses for in summer, I want them in linen and I can make them myself. So that's my goal.
So it's filling in the gaps.
Yes, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that the community is kind of shifting a little bit as well. We have a sewing group, we have a spinning group, because it is not just about knitting. We came into it through knitting and through experiencing, back to your former question, if you knit, after a while, you'll become more knowledgeable about how things come to be and what decisions you can make to make the world a little bit better.
Yeah. And, what kind of proportion of your Yavel community would you say are either interested or actively involved in sewing?
Well, it's been a question, actually, one of those questions. And everyone also does one or more needle crafts. So I think at this point, over 50% are also sewing. And as I'm getting more into it, I will take it with me when I talk about different things. So it's going to be a part of our community. Absolutely. Yes.
So what have you sewn so far that's in your current wardrobe, and what are your plans? Oh, so you're wearing a lovely, is that linen?
It's a linen hemp mix. Kind of gets that washed off.
I love that. That kind of almost looks like denim.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a top, really simple. I'm actually in another sewing community, Top Stitch Makers. So yeah, this shirt is from that community, and it was from a course that they have in their community. They're lovely people. So there's this top, and then I have Sonia Phillips' book, 100 Acts of Sewing. I made skirt number 1, top number 1. I've also made the very famous skirt with the buttons, with the pockets. So Liberated?
Yes. Oh, the estuary skirt?
Yes, the estuary skirts. That's the one. I've made that one. That's my biggest feat so far, with all the things and the bits and the thingies.
Yeah, the buttons and buttonholes.
Absolutely. I've got that dress lined up, but I've learned from Me Made May that I need to make a pair of trousers first of all. So that's going to be trouser number 1, kind of super simple. So I'm really a beginner.
That's fantastic. Where do you source your fabric?
That is always interesting. In order to find things that are good for planet, people, and animals, the best way for me to find it is go online. It breaks my heart because I would love to have a shop in the city that offers it, but there isn't any. So I could go into this more of a generic shop, and I would have to dive really deep and kind of get into the conversation with the owner, and that's sometimes something that is so hard for me, that I kind of want to be the activist and talk to these people like, you have to change your things around and you have to do things differently. And then I can see them sighing, and it's sometimes really frustrating that not everyone is open to it. And I don't get it. It really gets to me. Do you get that?
Massively, yeah.
get really sad sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Do you know what you're making me think of is when I'm at the school gate and I'm like talking about how, I managed to get my kids some school trousers from a charity shop. And there's a lot of people looking at me like, why? You can get them new from the supermarket for £5. And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, how do I present this without seeming judgy, but maybe planting some seeds? And it's a tricky.
But doesn't that say something about you? Because you say without seeming judgy, but they are judging you.
Yeah, well, I think that they are kind of internally, they're on their face, they're more confused. But anyway, I know exactly what you mean.
So I go online basically, and then I really look at the fiber content and where it comes from, where it's made, and but my stash is small, and I've become enlightened before I became an enthusiastic sower. So.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting that you're at the stage of your sewing journey where you haven't bought all the fabrics.
Yes, we're completely the other way around, because you're like that with knitting, right? Or do you have an enormous
so far, yarn? I'm only buying for the project.
That's great.
And I'm using it because, for one, we'll talk about stashes a bit more in a minute, but there's the space. Actually, let's talk about it now. Let's talk about stashes now. So I would say that most sewers and sewists have a fabric stash of varying degrees. There are the occasional experienced sewer that is some sort of unicorn that literally only buys something to use it. But they are so rare, I believe.
Yeah.
So what is the situation with yarn stashes?
Same.
Because yarn is bulky. That must take up a lot of space.
It's exactly the same. Varying degrees, unicorns. I have pictures of people in my head when you talk about the unicorns, because they're just two that I know of. And the weird thing is, I kind of feel sorry for them because I feel they're restricted.
Oh, that's so interesting. Do you? Are they not free? I think I would feel light, like there's not a weight of the stuff that I have to use. Like I could go anywhere and choose anything next.
Yes, but that's because you are you and you've come from stash. But these people, they are so... I'm making a face.
Tight face, and you're kind of
tight face, like
face with your hands.
Somebody's bottom.
Your mouth looks like a tight bottom.
And I kind of feel that they are restrictive.
So it's a personality flaw.
Well, I hear myself talk, but I kind of, that's what I feel. I'm not going to lie.
What's wrong with you? Why haven't you bought loads of lovely stuff?
Yeah. Why haven't you been bad first and then gone through the whole thing and then came out of the other end like you are now?
However, you yourself do not have a massive fabric stash. So
that's because I've got a massive yarn stash.
Right. Okay. So how big is your yarn stash? Dare I ask, how big is your yarn stash?
You dare. And I have to say, this is my profession. I get
it.
You still have a yarn shop.
No,
it's actually, okay. So I bought this massive shelves unit that used to belong to a carpenter. And I have lots of cubicles. And I've made a calculation. Until the age of 92, I can knit 2 cubicles a year. Cubicle is about... this. So you have to say the measurements in your measurement language.
I would say, what's that, 25 centimeters by 25 centimeters?
You do centimeters. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, of course you do. 25 by 25, and then about 40 deep.
Oh, so 2 of those a year until you're 92.
So a sweater.
So how many garments would that be a year?
A sweater, a shawl, a hat, and a pair of socks.
Oh.
Yeah, that doesn't make it too bad. Unless I would continue my life like I had been before, and like lots of knitters, they go to yarn shows or shops in their hometown or when they're traveling and keep buying, and never knitting all of it. And then it becomes worse and worse and worse and worse. And then it doesn't make any sense anymore. So now my aim is to really categorize it. And I don't organize it on thickness or color. It's organized by type of project. So I have sweaters together, socks together, a little bit like that. So my focus has turned around completely. I think most knitters in them, let's just sketch a bubble here. The new knitters, and that is not really new, but the knitters that have started in the last, let's say, 15 years, focused online, know about cool designers and cool brands, which is a thing, which is also really adds to the stash, because you want the latest thing from the latest designer. You want the latest magazine. You want to get in on it.
And the way they, I mean, just having been signed up for a couple of knitting kind of newsletters, the way they're like, a new thing.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, should I know about that? Yeah.
And I live in that really weird crossover world where I teach marketing, branding for those kinds of businesses, but at the same time, kind of trying to wake them up for selling is not bad. You need to make a living. Selling is good, but sell from your soul and from your values. And then you can still say, here's my item, please buy it. It's the best item in the world because it is animal friendly and such and such and such. So that's kind of the world where I'm in. And I'm trying to figure out how to use my stash in the best way. I'm not trying to figure out. I've had it figured out and I'm actively doing it. And now I'm actually building a course for people to help them work with their stash. So that's my next new thing.
That's very cool. So I have worked out my fabric stash. If I continue to make garments at the rate I tend to, I've got 3 years worth of fabric.
That's not too bad.
Fabric and garments to refashion. I include that in my stash.
Right. And could you not buy more? Is that an option?
I am giving myself a limit this year of only buying 6 lengths of new fabric this year.
Okay.
And by length, I mean between 1 to 3 meters, like enough to make a garment.
Right. And why 6?
One every other month sounds like. Although a caveat is I am allowed to buy the odd piece for if I'm making something for somebody else, if I don't have something. Like I make clothes for my kids often and sometimes my husband as well. And I'm also allowed, if I see some fabric in a thrift shop, and that could be in the form of curtains or bedding or a tablecloth. If I see some fabric in a charity shop, then I'm allowed that as well.
Yeah. And when you talk about allowed, do you feel that restricting yourself in terms of living a more sustainable lifetime is something that is holding you by the neck? Or
no, I think that consuming, we have to get it in check. We all have to get it in check. And I think for me, imposing, quote unquote, some kind of like structure to my consumption is the way that I can measure it, that I can say, because otherwise for me, I feel like I'm the kind of person like, I'm a moderator. I'm not an abstainer. Like for me to say I'm not buying any more fabric until all that's gone, that would make me feel like that. That would make me feel choked. But I am allowing myself some pieces. So, for example, like I work part-time in a fabric shop. So I see loads of beautiful fabric all the time. So to say, no more for the next 3 years, that would make me feel really, and I'd probably rebel and buy something and then feel rubbish. But allowing myself that kind of clause. And then because I do have the privilege of seeing that fabric every week, I've got the time to think about, like, do I really love it? Like a lot of it, I love the look of, and I love it like a piece of art, but would I want it on my body? Would it suit my personal style?
That makes such a huge difference, doesn't it? It was for me as well in the shop. I would put little clusters of yarn on the table and walk around it for 3 days, and then put something else somewhere else and walk around it for 4 days. And then I put it back because then I got over it. And I think as consumers,
that's so clever.
As consumers, we should do that more often and not feel like that feeling of FOMO where you go like, if I don't get it now, it might be gone. Well, then it's gone. Then there'll be something else. And I think little tricks like giving yourself, I don't know, for some people it's 1 day is agony and other people can do a week before you really buy it. That also can really help. And I think what you said before, that giving yourself that restriction also, when we come back to the people with the faces, it's also liberating, isn't it? Being able to make decisions, make choices, say, I'm going in this direction and not in that direction. I cannot have it all. I don't want it all. It is not healthy for me, for my environment. And it really is liberating to have less. Yeah, but it really, really helps to have people around you or to listen to podcasts that are in the same kind of vibration, because I don't know, our neighbors are not all like us, and our friends even. You can be like that green unicorn a little bit, and then it's really good to have people around you.
Yeah, I feel like just opening the discussions and starting, as you're doing, you're modeling, modeling behavior in various ways, and that's what I'm trying to do myself as well, really.
And for our kids, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Ultimately, yeah. And also there's a question of space as well, like physical space.
Oh,
like
yeah.
we live in Europe, like we don't necessarily have loads of spare bedrooms or separate sewing rooms. I certainly don't. I've got the corner of my lounge.
Yeah. I'm lucky that way. I do have the space, and I do have to tell you that my husband actually allows me to have that shelf unit in the living room.
Oh,
so that's true love, right?
It sounds pretty cool. It sounds pretty cool. So I'd like to just have a little dig into some more parallels and differences between our clothes making practices and our communities. So challenges and hashtags. So I know that you're no longer on social media, which is a bold move, which hopefully we'll discuss one day in the future.
Yeah.
But what are some of the popular challenges, aside from Me Made May, that knitters and crocheters like to participate in? And also, sub-question, can you tell me about your hashtag knit pile?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Do we have specific challenges? Yeah, I think a thing that happens a lot in the knitting community is by the end of the year, showing your best 9 is a thing.
Oh, right. Yes. So what is hashtag knit pile? Because I checked it out and it's a very, very pretty.
Yeah. And the thing is that you have the hashtag Me Made May, and I have it's not really, it's become a little bit of a thing, but it was either somebody I followed on Instagram or one of my customers, or both. They made a pile of their knitwear like years ago, and I reacted to it. I said, this is awesome. We should do a yearly thing. Can we do a hashtag around it? And then I offered the idea on her post. So there's no way I can go back and figure out who that was. So I know some people are listening right now, and I know that some people are like me. I can get so Sherlocky online. I would love to know who that person was. But that started the hashtag, and it became a thing, and people started sharing what they made throughout the year. And they're so pretty. And what is also very nice of the piles of knitting is that you can totally kind of see somebody's personality through it. The colors, the fabrics, the kind of techniques they use, the colors. It says so much about a person, and you do not even see the whole garment. I really, really love that hashtag. And there's things that I miss about social media, and definitely this is one of them.
Oh, lovely. In the sewing community, regularly there's a new sewing pattern will be released that seemingly like everyone goes wild for, and you see like a squillion versions pop up pretty quickly. Is that something that happens with yarn-based garment creating as well?
Absolutely. Definitely. We have rock stars of knitting. There are people going crazy, fangirling over designers. I've been on yarn shows, and it's even happened to me. That's the weirdest thing. People come up and you're Saskia from Javol. And I'm like, yeah. I have a friend, and she lets go of all her maturity when she sees some person that's a designer. And I've worked in music for a long time. So I was backstage managing and marketing communication for different venues in Rotterdam. we didn't have huge major artists, but kind of known artists. And I got to hang out with them. And as you work there, you do not like fangirl. That's not something you do.
Yeah.
That's so
The facade,
unprofessional.
you see behind the facade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, it's a fun thing. I did some crocheting with the crew of Bright Eyes, which was really fun. And things that we did. And it was that was my life. And so with knitting, I always was the same. I had the shop, so I was one of the people on the back end or the front end, depending on where you want to look at it. And but yeah, there's definitely some rock stars that people follow around. They knit everything that they design, and it's a crazy thing. I have no positive or negative.
Okay, right. Second from last question. Scraps and leftovers.
Right.
So scraps and leftovers from garment sewing projects can get overwhelming pretty rapidly. And whilst it can be tempting to chuck them out, many of us who try to sew more sustainably do a lot of hand-wringing about this and try and think up of lots of fun and useful projects to use them in. So what's the deal with leftover yarn? So what do you do with it all?
Yes. Well, you mend your
so do you always keep a bit in case you need to mend it? Oh,
yes.
That's such a good idea.
So do I have anything? I have lots of stuff lying behind me. So socks, you mend the holes with leftover sock yarn from, because I kind of love visible mending. It doesn't have to be invisible. I kind of love it if you can see that I gave it another shot, another chance. So there's that, but those are tiny amounts. So there's lots of scrap projects that you can do. And we have an online website called Ravelry.
Yes, and I've been on Ravelry.
Yeah, there's a lot of patterns there. There's a lot of inspiration there. And if you don't like Ravelry, there's always Pinterest. You can just Google scrap projects knitting. And I think with sewing, it's the same thing. You always get into this area where you're like, well, I don't really like a patchwork kind of look like things that look like patchwork, but there's where your creativity can really soar. And I love to get a base color of yarn that is just a normal amount, and then add the colors to that. So you have a base. There's always striping. I love striping. And literally granny squares, obviously. And that look, you don't have to wear it. You can still use it on your couch.
Yeah.
And you can also just, what I have in my room here is I have containers of scraps sorted in color.
Right.
So if I want, I can knit something that is yellowish from different kinds of yellow. And there's different designers that use that kind of look that looks really modern. It's just a matter of, it's like having a box of crayons and you just get thrown, you're in a restaurant and you're a kid and you get the crayons that are there and you have to deal with whatever you get. That's what it's like. And
I love that analogy. Awesome. Okay, right. Last question.
All right.
Can you name some individuals or businesses involved in making yarn and sustainability that inspire you that you'd like to shine a light on?
Yes, I can.
So there's Little Grey Sheep that you mentioned earlier.
Little Grey Sheep is amazing. Then Ovis Etc., which is a Dutch yarn dyer, an indie dyer.
You're going to have to send me a link for that.
Yeah. I will. And she really does a lot of work figuring out where the yarn comes from. It's all natural. Even for just a little bit of information here, if you knit socks, it's nice if you have a little bit of durability to it. And if you don't want nylon, you can use rami, plant fiber. And she takes really good care making a collection that has everything you need. So this is actually my ideal. If you can find a brand that offers it all and has different colors, that's basically all you need. And if you can find it in your area, in your country, in your part of the world, if you can become so enlightened that that would be enough for you, I think that is my ideal. Yeah. And then for the people in the UK, I love Wild and Woolly in London. Anna runs such a cool shop and with really good sustainable products. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I would really love to speak to you again in the future. I feel that there's probably lots more things that we can explore, but I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!